welcome Rob Joyce.
Hey, everybody. Make sure my mic's on. Am I good?
You're good.
Okay. It's great to be here today. I'm Rob Joyce. I recently retired after 34 years at the National Security Agency, where I was the cybersecurity director at the end and did things like led the hackers of NSA doing foreign intelligence missions to go out and grab intelligence in those heavily protected networks. Today I'm going to talk to you about the thing I think is the most important aspect of change going on right now, and is the thing that's going to be driving a lot of your business decisions, your defensive decisions, and even your personal life right now, and that's artificial intelligence. I see it both as a threat and an opportunity. If you wanted to sum up a position on AI, really AI makes everyone better, both the attackers and the defenders. Right? Those that use AI are going to outperform those that don't. AI is not a magical solution today, right? It's not this wizard that's going to do things that people can't do. But boy, you can get so much more out if you figure out how to get it into your workflow. And so if you're a cyber defender, it's going to help in that world. And we're seeing examples of where the cyber attackers are using AI to their advantage. Mostly it accelerates, right? It makes people move at faster speeds. So people think about the AI explosion we're in right now. It really wasn't. It was this slow build. There was a series of machine learning advancements. If you think about Facebook tagging you in photos, or the Deep Blue beating Garry Kasparov in chess, or the growth in the Go champion losing to a machine that essentially trained itself by playing against itself over and over again, and came up with new and unusual ways to approach the problem that we as humans wouldn't have thought about. But there's been some really revolutionary progress in the last few years on generative AI, and that's the thing that's catching everybody's attention, right? ChatGPT emerging, giving human-like conversations. It learns the patterns and structure of the input training data and then applies it forward to new questions and new things that come out. And the interesting thing about this new technology is the way it's scaling. You give it more data, more compute, and it's giving you better and better outputs and analysis. And that insatiable appetite for those two dimensions, both data and compute, is really a challenge now for the industry, but that's where you're seeing billions and billions and billions of dollars being invested to get the data that will improve these, to get to artificial data, because we literally have run out of the internet data to train on, and the new research that's going to propel it past the end of data. And then you see the explosions in data center, right? They're growing. The appetite for data centers and compute is growing 50% a year to satisfy this act. So let me introduce a term. Have any of you heard of P-Doom? That's how you pronounce that, P-Doom. I got asked on a podcast, live podcast, what my P-Doom was. I had never heard the phrase before. That's the probability of doom, that AI is going to rise up and kill us all, right? And I was at a conference where we tried once to survey the audience what their P-Doom was, and man, you as human beings are dark. A lot of people got to the point where they thought, the probability of doom is something approaching 100%, right? There are scenarios that people are talking about, right, where a super intelligent AI system is given a task, and it focuses single-mindedly on that task and not all of the second-order effects of it. And so it runs rampantly out of control with unintended consequences, right? There's another scenario where AI gets better and better and starts developing AI, and then as it's improving itself, it gets beyond human comprehension to understand what it's doing, and you get this super AI that we no longer understand how it's programmed and evolving, right? That's the singularity where it explosively grows. I am not a PDOOM, high PDOOM probability person. These are iterative improvements. These are machines where you can kick the plug out of the wall. We are going to see the evolution and improvements on probability of doom. And so I'm pretty happy to assume we're going to be okay. So, but now the question is, do these things think, right? If you remember back, the test for intelligence used to be the Turing test, where if you put a screen in front of somebody and you talked to it, you couldn't tell if it was a human or a machine. And if it passed that, that was artificial intelligence, right? That was the ability to mimic human conversation, intellect, and engagement. We are well past that, right? If you work with some of the online AIs, they really are able to duplicate human discussion and talk about human experience, and we've blown by that. But if you think about it, they aren't really thinking in that mimicry, right? And an example of how these AIs are not thinking machines, if you went into ChatGPT and said, hey, give me a number between 1 and 9, right? It'll spit out 7, right? It'll spit out 3. You ask it again, 5, 7, 7, not so random, 5, 7, 7, 6, 7, one more, 7, and 7, right? It is not random. If you look at 100 random digits from ChatGPT, you would get this big spike at 7. Why? Because it's trained on all this internet information, and we as humans, if you were asked, give me a number, you come up with 7 a lot of the time, right? And so as it ingested the entirety of our books and internet and other things, you got 7. Now, it's gone beyond that. Right? Now today, if you ask ChatGPT for a random number, in the background, it writes a Python program that on a machine somewhere calls random and gets you the best random that machine can generate, right? Which is a lot better than that curve that is mostly the number 7. So it is getting better in the way it approaches problems, but in reality, these GPT systems are stochastic processes, meaning they parrot back the things they've been trained on. They aren't coming up with new, and they don't think the way you and I think, right? So where's the threat today? Really, attackers have a big advantage in social engineering. I mentioned that AI makes everyone better, right? Well, at the same time, the defenders get a lot more advantage by closing technical gaps and technical deficiencies. So what are machines good at? They're good at looking at huge, vast amount of data, and their ability to unblinkingly stare at that data to find the anomalies. And so right now, the attackers are getting the ability to generate information in English for phishing, as mentioned earlier today, and things like that. But the defenders are getting an advantage to look at what is normal and find the abnormal, and to take big, complex things and ask the machine to summarize, what does this intrusion data mean? Explain it to me in a simple fashion. You can have a tier 1 SOC analyst now, almost automated in the way between machine learning and GPT technology to come up with the things that you need done 24/7 on your network to notice the anomalies. And then you still need people at a higher tier, the SOC 2 and 3 analysts, to figure out what are you going to do about it, and is that really a problem? But they're getting so much better at removing the noise that's underneath all of this. So where are these attackers getting advantage? Certainly authentic native English grammar and spelling. When we used to get the Nigerian prince scams, those were awful English, misspelling, and they just didn't make sense. They still worked on a percentage of the population, right? Don't get me wrong. They were there because they worked. But what we've got now with these GPT things are they put it in convincing context. They're socially aligned, right? If you go to a different culture and need an example in that culture, it can produce that. And you can do it at large volumes. If you had a person behind the keyboard manually spamming out emails, you are going to be outperformed by a lot with these bots. Even the ability for the high-end hackers to take and write scripts, you can explain to a generative AI machine what you need, and it can write a pretty good script that then you can go and do your attack with. But what I'm seeing in this social engineering is rapid advancement. I watched one company had an attack where they had a big, long chain of email that went at their accounting department, right, their finance department. And it was asking them to pay an invoice. But it wasn't just that one invoice payment email. It generated the entire thread going all the way back to where this fictitious company won a contract, delivered a product, the company loved the product, they then needed and had an issue getting paid and were elevating, asking for help in the payment process. It was forwarded on to this end user saying, hey, take care of this. We need to pay them. They're overdue. And it was the whole story. None of it existed, but it used real people from the company. It used a convincing storyline and an arc that ended in, I need to pay this person. And it was really, honestly, an awesome, awesome fish, right? So that's the kind of thing you're starting to see in the generative AI world, and we need to be able to attack against. So let me talk about a different set of vectors, though, well, where now we're starting to see deepfake technology. Can I get the control room to play cut 1?
I want you to see if you can figure out if this is a cloned voice. Is it real?
Right? You've been listening to me for more than 10 minutes, right? That cut, is that me or AI? And I'm going to play 2 more, and you're going to try to figure out which one's the deep fake, right? Play cut 2, please.
Here's sample number 2. Is this one real?
And 3.
This is the final sample. Is this a recording of my voice or speech synthesis from text?
Okay, show of hands. Who thinks number 1 was fake? Number 2? And number 3? Right? Anybody think they're all fake? Yes. Yeah, they are. So all 3 of those cuts were made from 2-minute sample of my voice where I didn't say any of those sentences directly, right? And now here I'm putting on the internet 30 minutes of my voice, right? Most of your CEOs are doing public speeches or industry groups. You know, there are samples of them out there. And for $7, you can make that voice say anything you want, right? 11labs.io will do these generative voices very cheaply, exceptionally high quality, right? My wife can't tell the difference between those samples and myself, right? It is exceptionally good. And so where are these going now? We're seeing deepfakes used as pretexts in some of these business email compromises and other things. And in fact, in March of this year, in Hong Kong, a person in a company got an email that they thought was pretty suspect. It didn't feel right. And again, it was in the finance department asking for some money movement. But the email was inviting them to a live Zoom call with members of their company. And on that call, they saw their CFO, they interacted with their CFO, and he authorized the $25 million payment that that employee did. So they executed $25 million on a real-time deep fake video of a real person in that company, right? That, to me, is the high end of scary, right? So we're going to have to come up with these authentication methods to figure out how we ensure that the person we're talking to is real in this age of deepfakes and AI. So for those of you in the CISO world, the CIO world, the defenders of our networks, the big worry is, AI is going to come out there and be able to find all of these zero-day exploits into our networks. They're gonna sift through the systems and come up with undefended attacks that blow through our defenses, our layered defenses, with those capabilities. So there's a group at Google, Project Zero, awesome set of folks who continually look at the technologies we trust. And their job is to find insecurities in the internet, whether it's Google's products or not, right? Open source software, hardware devices, and they constantly come up with new O-days, sometimes being used, sometimes not, sometimes potential threats, but they close them down. And they wanted to see, could they use Google's vast compute expertise, their AI, and their researchers to come up with O-days. And since their job was to find O-day, they called this Project Nap Time. Could they take a nap and let the machines take over their work, right? In the end, they said, nope. Today, the answer is no. They found the same thing I started off with, that there are things in that world that can be accelerated, but in general, it's not going to replace them. So they did that about 8 months ago. Earlier in October, however, they just did Project Sleepy Time, which is the follow-on to Nap Time, and they actually found an undiscovered O-day in the Linux kernel, and discovered that and patched it, and came up with a patch based on looking at previous vulnerability classes that people had exploited and running against the Linux code base, right? So they're starting to be able to turn out some of this. Now, the good news is, chances are the hackers in Russia don't have access to the compute power that Google can bring to this, right? So I think this advantages the defenders as we start to come up with technical ways to find the vulnerabilities that exist in our products and services. So where else do attackers get advantage today? They get advantage in their reconnaissance, right? Your exposure surface is mapped every minute of every day. Anything internet facing is tested, probed, exploited, and jiggled. So now you've got the ability to do that at scale and bring the outputs to AI and summarize that and ask questions of it to find the things you're looking for that might be exploitable. So it will help you prioritize where you can exploit, what you can go after. The other thing is, after you've had a compromise, LLMs are really good at secret discovery. So if you remember way back when the North Koreans hacked Sony, they compromised a massive amount of the Sony leadership email, and then they dumped it on the internet, and a bunch of reporters crowdsourced it and went through it and found embarrassing things that Sony executives were saying about the talent that worked for Sony, right? The actors and the directors and people like that, right? So it was crowdsourced across all of this. But what you've got today now is the ability to throw that corpus of data into an LLM and ask questions of it. It will be really easy to find the embarrassing, questionable, illegal pieces and nuggets that are inside that data using an LLM. And in fact, my worry is that it will be your LLM inside your company that is made to help your employees that will then be leveraged by the intruder to point to the data that is most important and most relevant for them to either be able to do extortion or embarrassment or some sort of advanced monetization of their breach. The other thing inside that secret discovery is you can look for literal secrets, right? What most big companies have lying around are keys and access tokens and other things that have just been forgotten in dark places on their network. And the machines that can scour everything are really good at finding that stuff. We had a major breach of a technology company this year, and the intruders got really good at going in and finding the machine accounts, the things that were part of scripts and automated processes where a machine had to log into another machine to do a thing. And so you've got hard-coded credentials, or you've got tokens that are in those scripts, and they were able to pick those up and then pivot into those machines using those credentials and further exploit and expand into the places that they needed to go. And I mentioned earlier, that extortion research, the ability to get to the things that are going to be painful for your company. Another, what I think is a near-term but avoidable problem, is code insecurity. There's an enormous use of AI to generate code today. And in fact, the Google CEO recently said that 25% of the code coming out of Google is now written by AI, right? It's checked by humans, integrated by humans, but it's written by AI, 25%. What we're seeing for some of the early code generations was AI package hallucination, where the code you got included a package that actually didn't exist anywhere on the internet. And a researcher said, hey, I can look at these imaginations and I can write that code package, and now people will include my malicious code inside my code development. And so figuring out how you get trusted code developers to make sure that the code sources you're training on, using, or deploying is not going to introduce the ability to generate a backdoor or a flaw is going to be important. But at the same time, there's code insecurity. Boy, the improvements in code security have been really high-end, right? GitHub Copilot will now flag vulnerability as code is developed. It will go ahead and give you natural language explanations of the vulnerabilities that it sees so that you can understand, learn from it, and avoid it. It will give you the ability to write a comment and have it generate the code and then evaluate the code that's been developed to be accepted or revised or improved. You're going to see the code development exploding so fast because the machines are able to go from our concept to the code they understand, given this huge corpus of data to be trained on, right? It was a pretty strategic move when Microsoft bought GitHub. A lot of people were wondering why, right? This was the why. They knew what was coming in the LLM world. They saw it in development, and they said, having the biggest corpus of code on the planet to train our machines on, and then to let people use our AI to generate that next generation of code is a huge advantage, and they went there. We're also seeing, though, AI in everything. So this is the Amazon app, and if you look down at that lower right-hand corner where the arrow is, that's Rufus. That's their AI bot, where you can ask questions about their product information, right? How comfortable is the strap? What's the battery life? Are the reviews mentioning faults and returns, right? It's intended to summarize those reviews and give you access like you were talking to a human who would give you recommendations. But if you ask Rufus, hey, what were the Amazon products in 2020? It'll be helpful on that. It has nothing to do with shopping, right? It'll give you that answer because there's just a big LLM behind it. I tried also to ask it, hey, can you give me a product liability lawyer because your Amazon product hurt me? And it didn't do that. So there are some constraints somewhere in there, right? But you can also ask it to write Python code for random things. And this chat bot that helps you shop will spit out code just like it was any other generalized AI. So as your company's thinking about taking on AI and making them public-facing on your websites, consider what you need to do to constrain the left and right boundaries of what that AI could and should do. Right? There's the product liability lawyer. So there are some constraints. There's a big power here, the ability to write code based on English commands and intent to then give you something, maybe even an agent that will autonomously do the things you need done, right? There's a company called Klarna who in September announced they're going to use AI to write software to create a custom stack for their company to replace Salesforce. That's a pretty bold move, that they believe that they can use AI development to go and replace a major SaaS product like Salesforce, right? I think it'll be limited, but it will be custom to their need, right? Whereas Salesforce is general to everything, they're going to write something that is specific to them. So this is what's coming, the ability to talk in plain English about what you want and get outcomes. It is not there today, but if you have good developers, man, they develop so much faster with an AI assistant than they do on their own. And most of them who have figured out how to use AI show much more satisfaction in their development job because they don't have to do the rote stuff over and over. The rote stuff, the AI is really good at. So it lifts them up into the creative space, the polish space, the space where they're making the outcomes rather than doing the scut work underneath. So everybody says, ooh, but hallucinations, right? And I gave an example of hallucinations earlier, of package, right? And I want you to think back to the first time you used ChatGPT, right? We all got exposed. Somebody probably showed you a Dr. Seuss rap based on something you knew or wrote in Old English style, a poem. You know, it gave you some amazing experience where it was creative and, you know, just was able to generate something unexpected. But then you asked to do a simple math problem or count the R's in strawberry or something like that, and it fell flat, right? You get the image generators, and you know it made 7 fingers or backwards elbows or things that didn't look right, right? I will say, if you're an AI user today, most of that stuff is well solved and well behind us. ChatGPT was dropped on the world November in 2022, so 2 years ago. And look at how far and fast this has come. That's the reason you see companies building $100 billion data centers. You see whole segments of the market coming up to take advantage and run toward this AI gold rush because there's real there, right? And the problems that were underneath that are being addressed are being hit by the researchers to improve. And I would say one of the examples of that is the OpenAI ChatGPT 01. It was codenamed Strawberry that came out a month and a half ago or so. That is a step-by-step reasoning improvement to LLMs. And what do I mean by that? That it does intermediate steps to consider an answer, tries to justify the answer, and then backs up if it needs to, or adds multiple ideas together to get to that outcome. So reasoning and chain of thought get to much better answers. And why do I say that? Here's an example of IQ test results, right? So the average person on the planet has an IQ of 100. That's the middle of that graph. And most of the GPT systems were down in the 80 to 90%, right? But ChatGPT 01, that's their preview model, not even the full-blown model, scored out at 120%. And you know, people would say, hey, was it trained on the IQ test so it knew the answers? No, this actually was a test developed offline by Mensa researchers so that the answers were not on the internet and could not have been in the training data. And it scored 120. That's beyond average human intelligence. So does that mean these are smarter than the average person? No, there's still a lot that they fail on in the generalized case. But this advancement is amazingly rapid and fast, right? This chain of thought reasoning solves puzzles better, it does math better, it programs better, and it is the next step in improvement over the stochastic parrot that just randomly spits out the things it was trained on. That's an eye chart. That is Firstmark Capital's landscape of AI companies. That was done back in March. It is, you know, just packed because of this gold rush. If you're interested in it, there's a QR code that'll get you to it. But it shows, you know, there is real money going in here because there's real outcome and promise, right? We're not all the way there yet, but if you look at where we were in 2022 to where we are today, massive, massive jump. So one of the things that is really creative is the way we're able to do multi-modes now. I've talked about images, I've talked about text and programming. So I gave a company called Suno AI this prompt. Hey, give me AT&T as a telco leader, think about 5G and fiber, and use country upbeat as the style. Can you play the song, please? Took literally a minute. I think we want Rich. Come up. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this is not a song that existed in lyrics or music or the voice, right? I could give it another prompt and tell it I want death metal to the same words or death metal feel with the lyrics altered, and you will get that, right? You can stop the music. Right. So where's it going? I've mentioned these experiments, investments, the rapid improvements. The investments are going into everything from startups to the biggest companies on the planet betting their future that AI is going to dramatically change the way we live and work, right? I think the development is going to continue at a pace I really find hard to imagine, and I'm living this each and every day, right? So if you're not an AI consumer in both your personal and business life, I would really encourage you to play with it, right? Think about it. The employees you pull out of school right now are going to be living in this world, right? They're co-developing software, they're checking their papers, they're coming up with outlines, they're doing creativity projects, they are living in that world, right? Those of us that use AI are going to outperform those who don't, right? That is really the message, and the way that these things are starting to do long-term thought. And the way you and I would solve a problem, a hard problem, we don't just spit out an answer, we don't know an answer, we go out and work the various aspects of it, we bring it back, synthesize it, and put it together. That is happening today in the AI research, and that's where it's going to go. So thank you for your time and attention today, I appreciate it.